Now in the studio is Arizona Senator John McCain. Welcome, Senator. What's your reaction to President Trump's travel ban?
That it is a confused process, which the good news is that it's only got to do with a pause. Bad news is that obviously this process and these conclusions were not vetted. There's so many questions that, for example, it didn't filter down to our customs people, who it can come in, who can't. Is a green card holder, as was originally interpreted, who's legally in this country, can that person be barred from coming into the country? I talked with General Petraeus last night. He's very concerned about the special visas for those interpreters whose lives are literally in danger as we speak, that they would not be allowed to come into our country. What about the Iraqi pilots that are training right now in Tucson, Arizona, learning to fly the F-16, and there will be more coming in? So there's so much confusion out there, and published reports are that neither the Department of Homeland Security or the Justice Department or others were consulted about this before this decision was made. Finally, lumping Iraq with Iran, right now we have several thousand Americans who are fighting in Iraq against ISIS alongside Iraqi military men and women. The Battle of Mosul has taken an enormous toll on the Iraqi military. Is Iraq the same as Iran is? Of course not. So it's been a very confusing process. I'm glad that it's a pause, but for us we've got to understand the ramifications of this kind of action.
Let me ask you about the international ramifications. Reince Priebus, the Chief of Staff, said not only did this have to do with the 7 countries, but this was a message. This is the first big signal in what America First means. How do you think the rest of the world interprets this as a sign of what Donald Trump wants to do with his presidency?
Well, I think you saw the reaction of the Prime Minister of England, who just had a very successful visit here, and the European nations. That's another thing that should have been done, of course, is to alert our friends and allies what we were doing, because we will expect them to cooperate, because people are leaving from these various places, particularly in Europe. So I think the effect will probably, in some areas, give ISIS some more propaganda. But I'm very concerned about our effect on the Iraqis right now. The dominant influence in Iraq today is not the United States of America, it's Iran. So what will the Iraqi parliament do? If we're talking about the fight against extremists and ISIS, the Battle of Mosul is going on as we speak, and we certainly don't need some impediment to succeeding in driving the ISIS out of Mosul.
Let me switch to Russia and ask you, Chief of Staff Priebus said Americans should be encouraged by the hour-long phone call yesterday. Were you encouraged?
I think phone calls are fine. I think that we have to understand Vladimir Putin for what he is. He has taken Crimea. He's dismembering Ukraine. He used his precision weapons from Russian airplanes to bomb hospitals in Aleppo. That used to qualify as a war crime. And his ambitions, obviously, of destabilizing other nations is very clear, not to mention the attempt to affect America's election. I believe that peace through strength is the answer, and I'm glad that President Trump has committed to rebuilding our military. That's one of our first priorities if we're going to deal on an equal basis with Vladimir Putin.
Is there a signal that President Trump should send, that the U.S. military should send, that the U.S. government should send to Russia? Donald Trump has sent encouraging signs. Mm-hmm. Is there another kind of sign you think they should send?
Give lethal defensive weapons to the Ukrainians. Absolutely. That's one of the first things. Increase the training and equipping. Tell our Baltic friends who are scared to death right now there will be a permanent American presence in those countries. And so, some of that, to give credit to the Obama administration, was begun there. It's got to be a clear signal of support, and then we have to counter Russian propaganda, which is succeeding, particularly with Russian-speaking inhabitants of the Baltics in particular.
Let me ask you, on the question of waterboarding, the president twice said last week that although he supports torture and he says the intelligence agents have told him it works, that General Mattis, his Secretary of Defense, has said no, and that he's going to trust him. So is the issue done for you in terms of?
I pray that it's done. I appreciate General Mattis's comment, and especially General Mattis's comment about what it does to the people who commit the torture. That's an aspect of this that we probably have not examined as much as we should.
More broadly, do you find hope in that? You have some differences with President Trump, but that, you know, he's saying, I've given the Secretary of Secretary of Defense the power to overrule me. Do you see that more broadly as a positive sign for President Trump?
I think the national security team around President Trump is very impressive, and I think you couldn't ask for a better one, whether it be General Kelly, General Flynn is great, General Mattis, and the ones they are bringing on board on their team. I am worried about the National Security Council, who are the members of it and who are the permanent members. The appointment of Mr. Bannon is something which is a radical departure from any National Security Council in history. Remember Karl Rove? There was when he sat in on one, and Axelrod, when he was supposedly. Look, that is, and the role of the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff has been diminished, I understand, with this reorganization. One person who is indispensable would be the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, in my view. So it's of concern, this, quote, reorganization.
All right, Senator McCain, we're going to have to leave it there. Thanks so much.
Thank you.